A warm welcome to viewers in Uyo, the Akwa State capital, and from around the world. This is World View. My name is Xavier Robert. And on our top stories today, Tunisia and EU signed deal to tackle irregular migration. UK's oldest medical union hit out at government plans to increase amount migrant workers pay to use state healthcare service to cover public sector wage increases, cover their hair and wear loose clothing. The details of these stories and more in a moment. First on Worldview today, Tunisia and the EU have signed a deal to tackle irregular migration, meaning those moving in breach of rules. Tunisia has become the main departure point for migrants trying to cross the Mediterranean to Europe. The EU had been struggling to cope with 72,000 migrants making the journey this year alone, mostly to Italy. The deal includes $118 million to stop smuggling, strengthen borders and return migrants. In recent months, black migrants in Tunisia have faced violent attacks due to an increasingly hostile environment. Tunisia's President Kais Saied had accused migrants of partaking in a plot to change the country's demographic profile, blaming traitors who are working for foreign countries. He later denied being racist. Tunisia is suffering an economic crisis, and increasing number of Tunisians are also trying to leave the country to go to Europe. Away from that, South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol has made a surprise visit to Ukraine, offering Ukraine with his wife Kim Kon-yi, following trips to Lithuania for a NATO summit and to Poland. It is his first visit since Russia invaded Ukraine. Support of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, and the significant political, security, economic and humanitarian aid is country's non-lethal military assistance to Ukraine, adding that humanitarian aid would be increased to $150 million in 2023 from $100 million last year. Additionally, South Korea will also launch a scholarship fund named after Yoon and Zelensky. President Vladimir Putin has not yet said if Russia would renew the deal under which Moscow allowed Ukraine to ship by 2022, established a protected sea corridor allowing Ukraine to remain, and had enough cluster ammunition to answer if Ukraine was to use the weapons. In an interview published, reports say Ukraine started receiving cluster weapons from the United States, a move that sparked concerns. Controversial weapons can disperse up to several hundred small explosive charges, which can remain unexploded in the ground. Putin stated that Russia had not yet used the weapons despite a certain shortage of munitions at some point. These have now arrived in Belarus from neighboring Russia. The DPSU says it is also assessing how many militants are in Belarus, which also shares a border with Ukraine, as well as their exact location and goals. DPSU spokesman and guards were continuing to monitor the situation across the country's northern border. He provided no further details. Away from that, President Cyril Ramaphosa has had a telephone conversation with President Vladimir Putin over the ongoing negotiations between Russia and the United Nations UN about the Black Sea Grain Initiative. Ramaphosa's discussion with Putin followed the South African leader's telephone conversation with UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. The South African leader had held a telephone discussion with President Volodymyr Zelensky on July 13. Meanwhile, Ramaphosa's spokesperson Vincent Magwenya says Ramaphosa will have further discussions with both leaders and the UN Secretary General about the matters. Away from that, the UK has signed a deal to join a trade pact with several countries in Asia and the Pacific, including Japan and Australia. Reports say the name of the pact, Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, CPTPP, is an unwieldy mouthful, but it is also a new club of 500 million people the UK will be able to access. According to reports, the CPTPP is a trade agreement between 11 nations: Australia, Brunei, Canada, Chile, Japan, Malaysia, Mexico, New Zealand, Peru, Singapore and Vietnam. Recall that those founding members signed the Pacific Trade Pact in March 2018. Between them, they generate 13% of the world's income. The UK is the first non-founding country to join and will be its second biggest economy after Japan. Nationals coming into the United Kingdom. The Prime Minister said the increase would help bridge the gap after the country approved a pay increase in public sector wages. According to him, the surcharge paid as part of a visa application will go up to $1,035, while the cost of work and visit visas will go up by 15%. He added that the cost of study visas, certificates of sponsorship, wide entry clearance, leave to remain and priority visas and others will rise by at least 20%. Meanwhile, the UK's oldest medical union has hit out at government plans to increase the amount migrant workers pay to use the state healthcare service to cover public sector wage increases. Reports say that Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's government this week approved recommendations to boost wages of teachers, doctors and police by between 5.0 to 7.0%. Sunak ruled out tax increases or government borrowing to fund the rise, but instead said hikes in the immigration health surcharge, IHS and visa fees would raise £1 billion. Doctors in Unite, which represents junior doctors, general practitioners and hospital consultants, said it was appalled by the move, as it would see migrants pay double to use the NHS. Away from that now, Iran's morality police are to resume controversial street patrols to enforce the dress code requiring women to cover their hair and wear loose clothing. It comes 10 months after mass protests erupted in response to the death in custody of Mahsa Amini, who was held for allegedly wearing improper hijab. Women and girls have burnt their headscarves or waved them in the air at the anti-establishment demonstrations. Many have even stopped covering their hair in public altogether. Authorities attempted to enforce the dress code using other measures while the morality police patrols were purged, but they have been met with derision on social media and open defiance on the streets. After the break, Indonesian President Joko Widodo announces minor cabinet reshuffle of 6 positions, including new communications minister, whose predecessor is on trial, accused of accepting $1.14 million in illegal kickbacks. Stay with us for details on this and more right after the break. Many thanks for staying tuned. A rescue is working to reach cars trapped in a flooded tunnel near the South Korean city of Cheonju have reportedly recovered 9 bodies. Floodwater caused by days of torrential rain poured so quickly into the underpass that passengers and drivers were trapped in their cars, unable to escape. Reports say at least 35 people have died. in total after flooding, landslides and power cuts across much of the country, while more than 10 people are missing. It is unclear how many people are still trapped in the 685-meter-long tunnel in the town of Osong, but 15 vehicles are thought to be submerged. Away from that, tens of thousands of protesters have rallied in the streets of Tel Aviv and other Israeli cities, promising days of disruption as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's far-right government advanced its plan to overhaul the judiciary. The rallies on Saturday marked the 28th straight week of demonstrations against Netanyahu's plan and come days after his government gave initial approval to a key bill, which is part of the overhaul. The bill, which was approved in its first reading, would reduce the reasonability clause through which the judiciary can strike down government decisions. It would also give the government a greater say in the appointment of judges. The bill still needs to be approved in 2 more votes, expected by the end of the month, before it becomes law. In Tel Aviv, protesters unrolled a large banner reading SOS and threw paint powder into the sky, streaking it pink and orange. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been discharged after an overnight hospital stay for checkups and monitoring following a dizzy spell. Netanyahu, aged 73, was rushed to Sheba Medical Center on Saturday after feeling mild dizziness. His office said he had left the hospital about midday on Sunday after stating earlier that his test results were normal and that he was feeling very good. According to Dr. Amit Sajev, Sheba's head of cardiology, Netanyahu had completed a series of tests and is in excellent condition. Elsewhere, China's economy grew slower than expected in the second quarter as youth unemployment hit a record high. Gross domestic product GDP expanded by 0.8% during April to June compared with the previous quarter, official data showed today, amid lackluster demand at home and overseas. While GDP grew by 6.3% year-on-year, the figure provides a flattering picture of the economy as it comes off of a low base of comparison with 2022, when Beijing's zero-COVID policies brought economic activity to a standstill. Retail sales in June climbed 3.1% year-on-year, while industrial production output rose by 4.4%. Economists had widely expected China's overall economy to grow by more than 7% still. China's National Bureau of Statistics (NBS) said the results pointed to the good momentum of the economy's post-pandemic recovery. Away from that, scorching weather is gripping 3 continents, whipping up wildfires and threatening to topple temperature records. Predictions of historic heat hung over swathes of Asia, Europe, and the United States on Sunday. In the Vatican, 15,000 people braved sweltering temperatures to hear Pope Francis lead prayer, using parasols and fans to keep cool. But in their black robes, priests like Francois Mbemba said they were sweating like hell. The 29-year-old said it felt hotter in St. Peter's Square than in his Democratic Republic of Congo diocese. In Japan, authorities issued heat stroke alerts to tens of millions of people in 20 of its 47 prefectures as near-record high temperatures scorched large areas and torrential rain pummeled other regions. In Indonesia, President Joko Widodo has announced a minor cabinet reshuffle of 6 positions, including a new communications minister whose predecessor is on trial, accused of accepting $1.14 million in illegal kickbacks. Budi Ari Setiadi, a deputy minister for villages, replaces Johnny G. Plate, who was arrested in May on suspicion of taking payments from companies linked to a program to build telecommunications towers and bring internet to thousands of villages. Johnny, who denies wrongdoing, faces life imprisonment if found guilty of corruption in a project that saw an estimated 8 trillion rupiah, that is about $533 million of state losses. He was the 5th minister in the president's 2 administrations to be charged with corruption. The new communications minister Budi founded a volunteer group that assisted in the 2014 election campaign of Jokowi, as the president is known. Away from that now, Iraq's prime minister has held talks with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad in Damascus during the first trip of its kind to the war-torn country since the 12-year conflict began. Iraq and Syria have maintained close relations for years, even after many Arab countries withdrew their ambassadors from Damascus, and Syria's membership in the 22-member Arab League was suspended because of the brutal crackdown on protesters in 2011. Assad received Prime Minister Mohammed Shah al-Sudani, who was heading a high-ranking delegation, at the presidential palace in Damascus on Sunday. The 2 leaders later told reporters they discussed fighting cross-border drug trafficking, the return of Syrian refugees, and the imperative of lifting punitive Western sanctions imposed on Syria. They also talked about Israeli attacks on the war-torn country and water shortages in the Euphrates, a river which cuts through both countries because of upstream damming in Turkey. Al-Sudani said they discussed ways to combat drought conditions in both countries caused by a reduction in rainfall, climate change, and upstream damming by Turkey. And finally, on World View today, Israeli authorities said a Palestinian gunman opened fire on a car in the occupied West Bank, wounding 3 Israelis, including 2 girls. According to authorities, the suspect fled the scene of the shooting, but he was later captured. In a statement, the army said the car came under fire from a vehicle close to the Tekoa checkpoint near the city of Bethlehem on Sunday. According to Israel's Magen David Adom Rescue Service, a 35-year-old man wounded in the shooting was in serious but stable condition. His daughters, aged 9 and 14, were lightly wounded by flying debris. The family lives in the occupied West Bank settlement of Nokdim. According to Israeli media reports, Israeli forces raided Bethlehem and apprehended the suspected gunman and 2 other suspects. They also seized the suspected gunman's car, which contained an M16 assault rifle in it. And with that, we wrap up our package for you on Worldview today. Do ensure to follow us on social media and subscribe to our YouTube channel, all of which you can find on our website, spectrumtv.ng. My name is Xavier Robert, reaching you live from the capital city of Akwa Ibom, and you have been watching Worldview on the Spectrum TV. Do enjoy the rest of our programming today. Bye-bye.